You may be seated. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome, both those of you here in person and those online via YouTube Live. You are not here physically, but your presence is still felt. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of St. Petersburg, Florida. My name is Reverend Ben Atherton Zeman. I'm the minister. We are gathered here today to give thanks for the life of Thomas Gunn Archibald, to honor his legacy, to comfort one another in our loss, and to remind ourselves and tell the world about the difference Tom made in our lives. My role in this will be fairly minor. I'm here to help create a container for this ceremony, which began with Gemma's beautiful bagpiping and will feature mostly Tom and Barbara's family. Feel free to follow along in your program. I hope you all got the programs. And please note the QR code inside, which will give you access to the video that will play about halfway through the program. Following that video, it's your turn. You will all have, maybe not all, but those who wish will have the opportunity to tell us your memories of Tom. I will bring you the microphone in order to do this. Thanks to those of you who have signed the sympathy book and cards, which are in the back. Please continue to do so throughout the day. We have bathrooms. They are both gendered and gender-free, and they're mostly that way through Gilmore Hall to your right. And following the celebration of life, we invite you to the reception, which will also be in Gilmore Hall. If there aren't enough chairs for everyone, and I suspect there won't be, you can just keep going down the hallway to Conway Hall, and we have additional seating there. And if you prefer to eat outside, because eating tends to figure more masks, and some of you are wearing masks, there is outdoor seating available for the reception. We'll begin by lighting our chalice, and for Unitarian Universalist churches in general, and for UU St. Pete in particular, our flaming chalice is our symbol, and I'm pleased to welcome Miley DRC. And when she lights it, I invite those who know our church covenant to say it out loud, and those who don't know it, I'm going to do it so it'll be a call response. So you have about a second to think, do I agree with this? Yes, no? Okay, and if you do, you can say it along. So we'll start with, go ahead and light it. Love is the spirit of this church, and spirit its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you. Our first speaker today will be Tom Archibald himself. His words will be read first by me and then by his grandchildren, Harry, Kate, Luke, Emma, Riley, Hannah, Izzy, Amalia, and Ava. So they'll come to the front, and they'll be to my left after I say my part. So, in 2016, Tom said the following. In 2002, I began to write an autobiography for the first time. I believed that my working career had ended, and I was looking for something to do. Now, 14 years later, I feel the need to update what I had written. It turns out there was more to the story, and perhaps at 72, I still have more ahead. I feel that I am the luckiest of men. I have a loving relationship with my wife, Barbara. As we spend more and more time together in retirement, I value this relationship all the more. We are amazingly well suited for each other, happy in each other's presence and unhappy outside it. We are constantly amazed at our good fortune, while at the same time surprised by the strange person each of us has ended up with. In my life, I have 5 friends that I am proud to call my children, each of whom I have seen grow up from a young child into a successful adult. Each now has a spouse, a job, and their own children. Together they have 11 children, our grandchildren. Barbara and I can only stand in awe at how our kids handle their own families and careers as they reach the difficult midlife period that we faced in what seems like only a short time ago. They are stronger, smarter, and better than us in every way. In addition, Tom says, I can look back on a career in chemistry and teaching that has left me with friends and a respectable record of scientific accomplishment. I have also had the rare opportunity to travel in the world, live in many cities, and practice many other trades besides chemistry. And I have had the luxury to do what I love most, learn new things. There is also the question of why one, me, should be writing this sort of thing. Actually, I don't expect it to be read. I am writing it for myself. If you enjoy it, so much the better. But I have recently felt the need to consolidate some experiences and photographs in one place where I can occasionally look at them and remember. Signed, Thomas Gunn Archibald, February 2016.
Hello, I'm Harry Echtman, Sybil and Barry's son. We are now going to read from my Opie's autobiography. Thomas Gunn Archibald, me, was born in Penn Yan, New York at 2:30 a.m. on Wednesday, February 3rd, 1943. My parents had been married for 4 years, and it was the middle of the Second World War. Understandably, I was not in much of a position to judge the event, but later I heard rumors that the birth was very hard and that there would be no more children. I don't know the truth of that, but at any rate, I was an only child. My father, Harold Archibald, was born in 1906 with a heart defect, a hole between the right and left sides of the heart, which turned his lips blue from too little oxygen and left him weak. This defect is easily fixed with surgery now, but in those days was incurable. His life expectancy at birth was under 30 years. As it was, he lived until his late 50s, but was in bad health for most of his life. Although he finished the work for his PhD in math, his health didn't allow him to complete his orals, so he left his university and went to Keuka College in upstate New York to teach math and photography. My father was intensely interested in new things. As a boy, he had one of the first radios in Nova Scotia and was one of the first to hear the Marconi radio. While at Keuka College, he became interested in photography and took many photos of the school. These photos were turned into a mural 6 feet high and dozens of feet long that was placed on the wall around the dining hall at the college. He said that he had to wash the print in the swimming pool because that was the only place big enough. He also took dozens of colored slides and colored 16-millimeter movies as early as 1940, a rarity then, especially in wartime. We had one of the first television sets in New York, which in 1952 got only one channel from Rochester. He was always fixing the set and learned electronics by experimenting with our radios and TV. I was also interested in new things. We had a Dodge or Plymouth with suicide doors, where the back doors opened to the front. When I was 2 or 3, I was in the back seat while my parents were tooling along at 40 miles an hour. Somehow, I unlatched the door and it flew open like a parachute, flinging me out of the car. Fortunately, I ended up in a snowbank and wasn't hurt. They sold the car.
Hello, I'm Kate, Miley, and Brett's daughter. When I was young, I probably suffered from a number of fairly common learning disabilities, including dyslexia and ADHD, but in 1949, these were unknown. Spelling was impossible, as all words looked correct to me. I was also quite sickly and suffered from asthma and hay fever. It is impossible to know the truth of all the amorphous sicknesses I experienced, whether they were real, imagined, or just the result of the family situation. I liked staying home from school during the day because I could listen to the radio. There were great soap operas like Young Witter Brown and, of course, The Shadow. I also liked the Cowboys, like Roy Rogers and Tom Mix. When we got TV in 1953, I watched Kukla, Fran, and Ollie in Howdy Doody. One of my great prizes was my Howdy Doody ventriloquist dummy. Later, when I joined the Christian Temperance Union at church, I got a nice bronze pin, which I pinned on Howdy Doody. He never drank again. When I was forced to go to school, it was in a single room, perhaps 25 feet wide and 25 feet deep. Mrs. Ansley was my teacher for all 6 years. White-haired, stern, pleasant, and all-seeing, Mrs. Ansley was right out of central casting and perfect for the job.
Hi, I'm Luke. I'm Miley and Brett's son. A little deduction will lead you to the fact that not only was the school one-roomed and one-teachered, but also all 6 elementary school grades were taught there at once. My last year in 6th grade, we had a total of 2 boys and 11 girls for all the grades. There are probably lots of advantages to this system of education. For one, you get to see the same lesson 6 times over the 6 years. If you don't get it at first, you have lots of chances, and also Mrs. Ansley was never exactly sure which grade you were in anyway. All of this was fortunate for me since my dyslexia was very bad then. I was always the first person out in a spelling bee. I wrote my name M-O-T 50% of the time and was essentially unable to read until the 7th grade. Fortunately, I could remember things well enough to get by. And my father taught at the Women's College. In the 1940s, women were demure. The major sport was rolling hoops the size of hula hoops made out of wood. This was done by lightly stroking the hoop with a stick while running after the hoop. On May Day, there was a big celebration and the crowning of the May Queen, in which teams of girls chased hoops all around the campus. And for a crowning, you need a crown bearer, preferably young, male, and you guessed it, me. I remember 2 horrors from this experience. One at age 4, having to dress up in silk pants with a really stupid hat. And 2, after having carried the crown carefully for almost all the way to the queen, dropping the crown and watching it roll away. And if that is not enough, having to repeat this performance every year for 3 years, at which point, mercifully, a younger Patsy was found.
Hi, I'm Emma, Miley and Brett's daughter. In the spring of 1954, when I was 11, we moved permanently to St. Petersburg, Florida, for my dad's health and also for my mother's. She was starting to get sick too. The law school, which was associated with Stetson, yes, the hat guy, University in Dallin, Florida, was taking over a large building in Gulfport. The building had once been a big hotel called the Rolliet Hotel, which is Taylor backwards, the developer's name. It had been built in 1928 for the boom time land sales in Florida. Babe Ruth signed his $1 million contract to the Yankees there before the crash. The buildings looked like a walled Spanish city with the Golden Dome Tower of Seville at the center. It was my father's job to get things in order for classes to begin in the fall. Living at Stetson was great. I had free run of the empty buildings with all of their nooks and crannies and learned a lot about construction. The best time for me was when I could climb the tower, 7 stories high, and look in all the directions across the flatness of St. Pete.
Hi, my name is Riley. I'm Miley and Brett's daughter as well. At the end of that first summer, I entered Diston Junior High School. It was a lonely time. The sheer number of students was daunting, and I don't believe I talked to anyone that first year. My parents tried to encourage me to make friends and sign me up with a girl who lived across the street to go to cotillion, which turned out to be a dance class. By now, the girls had changed shape, and although they were interesting from a distance, you wouldn't want to touch one. The dance lesson for someone with no idea of left and right and no sense of music was a nightmare, and I was so traumatized I never learned to dance even later in life. The girl was so angry at me that she probably never learned either. During high school, I became involved in scouting, and the experience was a very good thing. I found the organization of tasks to earn merit badges to my liking, and by my senior year, I had gotten my Eagle Scout badge. For the biking badge, for example, I rode my 3-speed bike, complete with camping gear, from St. Pete to Mayaca State Park, a distance of 50 miles one way. I camped for 2 days and rode back. I remember the ride being very hot with lots of cars, as there was no freeways yet.
Hello, I'm Hannah, Tamara and Alex's daughter. In high school, I learned a number of useful things. I found that, unlike English, which still remains a mystery to me, I had an inclination for math and science. I was especially good at chemistry and worked on several projects with my teachers, generally keeping up my end as a campus nerd. In my senior year, I worked on a project to extract Brazilian pepper seeds. It seemed that the birds would come in winter, gorge on the seeds, and then fall out of the trees and stagger around. My teacher thought that there might be something useful in the pepper seeds, but it turned out that the birds had just overeaten. My dad was a Rotarian, and he was able to get me into junior government, where 1,000 kids went to Tallahassee for a week and ran the government. As neo-environmentalists, we were about to pass a law making it illegal to put anything metal into Florida waters, when someone pointed out that boats were made of metal. In 1960, I graduated from Boca Ciega High School, successfully avoiding the senior prom because of an unfortunate childhood incident involving dance lessons.
Hello, I'm Izzy, Tamara and Alex's son. A friend of my father's arranged for me to go to Davidson College in North Carolina. Quite frankly, I had no idea about Davidson, but it was away from home, and my parents were quite ill by then, so I was happy to leave. At Davidson, I did miserably in French and calculus due to my strong dislike of the teachers, and I began to think of majoring in chemistry largely because of my uncle Francis, who was a PhD chemical engineer. I had many other adventures during those years, like becoming the lighting manager for several Davidson productions, hitchhiking to Oregon for the pea harvest, and spending a night in jail in Shiprock, New Mexico. But you'll have to buy my autobiography to read about them. After graduation, I went to Europe, bought a Vespa from someone on the street, traveled all around, sold the Vespa, and arrived back home without a cent in my pocket.
Hello, I'm Amalia, David and Caroline's daughter. It was now time for grad school. Did I mention I wasn't good at long-term planning? Senior year at Davidson, and everyone knew where they were going. On to grad school, getting a job, joining the army, something. I had no idea. About a month before graduation, a professor from Tulane came to the campus recruiting. Luckily for me, he was desperate for students. I was given a Ford Fellowship because I said on the application that I wanted to teach, and perhaps I did. As the summer after graduation wore on, my father became very ill and died on August 1st, 1964. It was a difficult time, even though his death was not unexpected. I remember the service and feeling like I should be very emotional, but it seemed unreal and I was unable to cry. It was years before I could mourn him properly, not until I had some therapy.
Hello, I am Ava, David and Caroline's daughter. My mother insisted that I return to Tulane, and I moved to the French Quarter where I lived for the next 2.5 years in various apartments. I finished most of my classwork and cumulative exams during the first 9 months. It was the first time in my life that I really excelled in something. I had, until this time, always believed that I was dumb because of my early learning disabilities. Now it was apparent that not only was I not stupid, I was actually quite good at something. I had a few drinking buddies, and in the summer of 1965, we took up the challenge to have a drink in every bar in the French Quarter. This was no mean feat, because there were over 250 bars there at the time. By visiting a minimum of 6 to 8 bars per night, we were able to accomplish the task within 6 weeks. We mostly drank Jack's or Dixie beer, but occasionally Guinness. And with a warning to my grandchildren not to try this on their own, this is where my story ends for the time being.
Thank you. I think Ava and Amalia are going to stay on stage and be joined by Caroline and David Gould. This was the spot for it.
We're going to sing a song by Pete Seeger called Turn, 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 made famous by the Byrds. We would like you guys to join in after maybe the first verse or something. Maybe we'll motion.
Do everything There is a season turned, and a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to love, a time of hate, a time of war, a time of peace, a time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season turn, turn. A time for love, a time for peace, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late.
Welcome Sybil Archibald Echtman to share her memories of her father.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for being here to help honor my father's life. We would have been really moved to see how many people turned out for him. I'll try to get through this with a minimum of tears. My dear, wonderful, complicated, difficult, loving, and brilliant dad was such a large presence in my life, it seems impossible that he is gone. He was a beautifully loving heart wrapped in a curmudgeonly crust. And I admired him so much. There were many challenges at the start of his life, as you have heard from previous readings. Both of his parents struggled with serious illness, and he was often left on his own. His family spent the warm part of the year in upstate New York, where his father taught, and then moved to Florida, often halfway through the school year, for the warmth. He found it an isolating experience, and he struggled. What stands out most for me from these years is how he taught himself to read despite his dyslexia. This is my dad all over. He somehow figured it out in his teens, and once more he did it on his own without any of the support kids get today. I can imagine him sitting there year after year, watching everything, his brain ticking away until he could discover the secret of what he needed to succeed. This deep curiosity about the way things work and his desire to learn and grow carried throughout his life. When it came to parenting, he also started with a deficit. It's no surprise he really didn't know what he was doing because he had little guidance from his experience growing up. Let's just say this. When I tell my friends about some of the things that happened in my childhood, they really have trouble believing it. For instance, when I was around 3 years old, my dad had a parrot named Sidney Greenstreet. He chopped down a tree and it filled half of our living room. The parrot was uncaged and slept on the tree. He had free reign of the apartment. My mom tells a story of how she would hear the parrot screaming and go looking for him. There he would be sitting on the edge of my crib, yelling in my face. But what Dad lacked early on in parenting know-how, he learned. Just like with his dyslexia, he figured it out over time. I never once doubted his love or that he would do anything for me. He commuted 2.5 hours each way to work in horrible LA traffic so I could go to private high school. And by the way, it was an incredibly dangerous job, manufacturing a rocket fuel he had invented. Once I was even pulled out of school to pick him up because his lab had exploded. He had soot all over his face, just like in the movies, and it was terrifying. My dad always had my best interest at heart, even if we disagreed. When my parents divorced and emotions ran high, he fought for me to work out my relationship with my mom, even though they were estranged. Even though he was busy, he made time to take me on camping trips or visits to San Francisco. He ultimately went on to become a world traveler. If you name a place from Antarctica to Mongolia, Africa to South America, or any US state, chances are he and Barbara visited there. When I was younger, there were times when Dad and I clashed, a lot of times. He was hard on me and could be very challenging and opinionated. For those who know me, I'm sure this doesn't ring a bell at all. But with all that, there was never a time in my life when I really needed him that he was not there, and he always knew what to do. He immediately understood the heart of every problem and saw the solution. He really did seem to know everything, and if he didn't, he figured it out. My husband, Barry, relied on his advice, and my dad immediately took him into his heart. Dad didn't care about cultural or religious differences. And Barry, I hope you know, he always stuck up for you if I ever complained. He would say, "Give Barry a break," or "You should be nice to him." He was a wonderful grandfather to my son Harry, who also turned to him for advice. Dad was so proud of him and of all the grandchildren. When we spoke at night, he would often tell me what the grandkids were up to. He was a loving husband, and I am so grateful that he and Barbara found each other. She made his life for him, and they were the perfect pair. As I mentioned earlier, Dad and I at times did have a complicated relationship, but he kept learning and growing throughout his life, and thanks in part to his examples, so did I. Both of our hearts opened, and for the last several years of his life, we spoke almost every day. My dad was an extraordinary person. He came from a humble beginning, challenges that might have derailed many people for life, and accomplished so much. Among his many careers were rocket scientist with over 100 patents, pharmaceutical consultant, orange rancher, realtor, university professor, and comedy manager. He even built a house from scratch all by himself. One of my favorite memories was from this time, going in a rusty old tractor with a long, flat trailer to a dry riverbed to pick out stones together for the fireplace and outside of the house. On the way there, he would let me drive. a dream for an 8-year-old. He gave his time and energy freely throughout his life to others, manning a suicide hotline, making food for the hungry, being an alternatives to violence trainer, and serving on the boards of many community organizations. I admired and loved him so much. I'm grateful to have seen his daughter. Thanks for everything.
Sybil.
There are places I remember all my life, though some have changed, some forever, not for better. Some have gone, and some remain. All these places have their moments with lovers and friends. I still can recall, some are dead and some are living. In my life, I've loved them all. All these places. There's no one. Can we go back to the start of that verse? Thank you. All these friends and lovers, there is no one compares with you, and these memories lose their meaning when I think of love as something new. Though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before, I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. Though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before, I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. In my life, I love you more.
We'd like to welcome Barbara Archibald to talk to us about her husband.
Hello to friends and family. It's so good to see you all. It is the weekend of what would have been Tom's 80th birthday, and it feels so right that we are celebrating his life. Our loving celebration of Tom would have thrilled him, and at the same time mortified him. He hated a fuss. But as Reverend Ben says, the mourners have needs too, and we need a fuss. I thank Reverend Ben, Office Manager Kelly Olson, and the Care Committee, Karen, Danny, Ellen, Carol, Laurie, for making this celebration of Tom's life a real celebration. My life is filled with memories of Tom, and my loss feels so heavy. I am without my loving husband, who helped and protected me for the last 4 decades. I'm only finding out now how much, and I am without my best friend. For many years, that's what we were, friends. And then we got to mean more to each other as our old lives were disappearing. We came from different backgrounds. He came from a long line of Canadian Baptist ministers. My father still put the tefillin on every morning. Those are the black boxes that religious Jews put on. Those boxes contain the prayers. And my father prayed to a Jewish God. Tom never met a Jewish person until he was an adult. I hung out in high school with the girls who'd been to Israel. We had each emerged from trying childhoods. You've heard a little about his from our grandchildren and from Sybil. We started out as friends who cared about each other and grew to love each other. And it is a great happiness to me that our love lasted all our lives. The first thing I noticed about Tom was how he looked at things. He really looked at them until he understood them. That was true when he was a young man and also when he was older. I remember we were in port one day, not long ago, and we were both beat after a day of touring. But he couldn't keep his eyes off the dock across the way, where huge cranes were unloading a container ship. He was trying to figure out why they did it in that way. And so it was all his life. He watched and learned. In the 70s, Tom hired a contractor to build an addition to his home. He watched the contractor and the subs work. He kept a book, How to Build Your Own House, in the bathroom. Then he built another house himself from the ground up in the middle of an orange orchard where his kids grew up. And when his first wife, Dottie Archibald, became a stand-up comedian in Los Angeles, he taught himself how to write jokes. At the same time, he had one of the first Apple computers and taught himself all about computers. In the 90s, he was an organic chemist in a defense company called Aerojet, and he realized that the same defensive techniques he used in making explosives could be used in the manufacture of certain drugs. Tom was part of a team that turned Aerojet Rocketdyne into Aerojet Fine Chemicals. His boss, Rob Mayotke at Aerojet, is here with us today. Mike Coburn, his good friend at Los Alamos, wrote me recently that Tom was one of the most talented and versatile scientists that I have had the pleasure to work with, and the most fun to be with. Can you all hear me okay? In the early aughts, he became a drug company executive and finally a consultant to Port and Fine Chemicals, headquartered in Shanghai, where he learned to appreciate his Chinese friends like Ching Xiao, who would be here today if it weren't for COVID. Ching really knew how to be a friend, and the same is true of Paul Cheng, who is with us today on live stream from California. Along the way, Tom went to law school and also earned all the credits for family and marriage counseling. Not that he wanted to practice these things, he just wanted to know about them. We lived on a small island in the Caribbean for 10 years, and that suited his adventurous spirit just fine. He loved going over to St. Thomas in our Zodiac inflatable boat. After docking right on the front street of Charlotte Amalia, he would pick up our beat-up car, which we parked on a side street, and he'd go do the shopping. Then he'd repeat the steps the other way, coming home. I had trouble getting into and out of the Zodiac, as you can imagine. So he figured out a contraption of steps at the bow that he built, so I could get on and off like a lady. I loved disembarking in front of tourists in town, wearing my suit and carrying a briefcase. They had never seen anything like it. He learned how to snorkel and dive. He got a job teaching chemistry at UVI, University of the Virgin Islands. His course was a prereq for the nursing degree, and for years, every time we went to a doctor, one of his former students would greet him with a, "Good morning, Professor Archibald." Mercy Blosser, our friend and neighbor from the Virgin Islands, is here with us today. She remembers all these things. When we came to St. Petersburg, his great loves were this church and Aspect. In the early St. Pete years, he did a lot of repair work in the church, including replacing all the ceiling lighting fixtures in the social halls. I tell you this because when I returned to this church after Tom died, his friend Reggie greeted me. Look up, Reggie said. "He's everywhere in this church." I looked up eagerly, expecting to see an apparition of Tom. Then I saw that Reggie was pointing to all the overhead lighting that Tom had installed in Conway Hall. As for Aspect, he loved the Aspect community at Eckerd College. He loved its collegiality and warmth. He was always reading things late at night from which he could fashion lectures, not just about science, but also about economics and current events and whatever else interested him. And he got better and better at giving lectures, from being uptight at first to telling jokes and teasing his listeners at the end. In our later years, we traveled a lot. We were our best selves on a trip and enjoyed each other's company. Just how much we saw hit home for me just a few weeks ago when I was with my granddaughters on the West Coast. For old time's sake, we played bird bingo. That's a game where you call out various bird names instead of numbers. As our bingo caller called many exotic birds, I realized that Tom and I had seen them all in their native habitat. Toko toucan, guinea fowl, Atlantic puffin, blue-footed booby, emperor penguin, great bustard, kookaburra, lilac-breasted roller. How lucky we were. But he was first and foremost a family man. So proud that we had 5 children and 11 grands. He admired his daughters, Sybil and Lydia, both artists. He thought of Sybil as his successor in the line of Archibalds who could do many things. And he cared for my children, Miley, Tamra, and David, loving their talents. During their teenage years in LA, he did the weekly marketing run, returning home with provisions to feed the hungry mob, our kids and their friends, who hung out at our house. I've left out a lot of what made Tom, Tom. I found him so handsome and so intuitive. He could be so charming. He loved me like I had always dreamed of being loved. He could be helpful, caring, and sometimes infuriating. But the infuriating part did not trouble me for long. When I look back at photos of us, the first thing I notice is that I always had a grin on my face. That's just how things were. I was happy whenever I was with Tom. And in the end, that's what I feel most. Gratitude for being able, for so long, to wear that goofy smile. It was a state of grace. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you, Barbara. We have some volunteers who have agreed to roll our television out. And by the grace of James's phone and the internet, we will see images of our late beloved Tom. now it's your turn. I will bring the microphone to you, and we invite you to share your memories of Tom. I believe we start with Tamara Gould.
Thank you. And while I'm giving my brief remarks, please all be thinking if any of you want to contribute. I know there's so much love in the room for Tom and for this incredible life well lived. And Mom, you talked about the mourners. I feel like we've heard, much about Tom's life, and there's so much about my life with Tom. I think about, he came into my life as, I've known him actually my whole life, since I was 2, I think. So there's no memory without Tom for me. But when he came to us, we didn't make it easy for him, as you can imagine. And I would say I gave as good as I got, and we really came through it. And I felt like when you said that Tom really looks at things, I felt that Tom really looked at me, and I felt that he saw me, and we found so much. I think, respect for each other. And I feel like he really helped me become the adult that I am. And I'm so appreciative. And I look around this room, and I know that Tom helped each one of you in this room become a better version of yourselves. And I am so grateful for how he loved my mother. I'm so grateful for how much he loved me and my brother and my sister. And I'm especially grateful for how much he loved our children and all of these grandchildren. He really did. And it was really true. I had the very funny experience of meeting a man who bought a house that Tom built. He and I spoke about a month ago, and he said, I live in Tom Archibald's house, still, the house that he built. And I remember when I went to buy it from him, and his 2 young daughters were there walking around with him, and he wanted me to tell you that everything is still running. And so he built a good house. But that was Tom. He knew how to do everything. He knew how to fix things. He just, and it was not really our family's way at all. We would like to talk about things. We would like to, chat with people. But Tom was always fixing everything and looking at how things worked. And we were so lucky to have had Tom in our lives. But I want to just read a brief poem that I really felt was good for my mom especially, but for everybody. And you guys may know it. It's called The Island by Langston Hughes. Wave of sorrow, do not drown me now. I see the island still ahead somehow. I see the island and its sands are fair. Wave of sorrow, take me there. And I'll pass it back.
Hello, my name is Brett DRC. I'm Tom and Barbara's son-in-law for the last 25 years. So when we all lived in Sacramento, I used to talk to Tom a lot about business, and he shared a lot of stuff with me that I've carried through my business for a long, long time, and I appreciate that. But they also hired me as their financial advisor many years ago, and when Tom and Barbara were talking to me about that, Tom said, hey, if you screw this up, we're moving in with you in my home. So I thought that was great motivation, and I appreciate that as well. And thankfully, it all worked out, at least up to this point.
Hi, I'm Alan Froelich, a member of this congregation, and I just want to I'm one of the people that is not part of his family, but who was touched, I think, as many people were in such an important way by him. And in particular, right before the pandemic began, I lost my wife. And I was in a very bad way, really pretty much on my own here in St. Petersburg. We had moved here not long before, and eating every meal alone, and just going through a difficult time like many people have. And Tom saw me on a Zoom chat, and out of the blue he called. He was concerned. He just sensed that things were not right with me, were not good with me. I met him twice, I think, down at Crescent Lake at a time when we were wearing masks, and he had a mask that I think he got from from his son-in-law from China. You know, he said, "Oh, you're gonna have a mask," which was just a nice little gesture. And after a couple of times of meeting, he said, "Why don't you, you know?" And everyone was in their bubbles, and everyone was afraid to come anywhere near anybody else, like kryptonite or something. But he said, "You know, I think, why don't you come over and have dinner with us on our porch? We can sit apart and wear a mask when we're not eating, and I think we've all been very careful." And so I did. And then I met Barbara, and really, and for much of the pandemic, the dark parts of the pandemic, we ate a meal once a week together on their beautiful porch, which probably many of you have seen, overlooking the bay, watching the moon and the sunset and the moon come up and all the activities down there. And it really kept me going. And they are just wonderful people who have helped me so much and had such an impression on me. And all the things said about Tom are completely true. And they are a wonderful couple as well. So I will miss Tom forever, and always remember what Tom and Barbara did for me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Reggie Craig. I'm a member of the church, and I jotted down a few things. As we've all heard, Tom was really a multifaceted person. So this is just one perspective of my experiences with Tom, which I'm trying to capture a little bit. I was fortunate to get to know Tom when he first started attending our church. He and Barbara were part of our covenant group. Tom became involved in UU's helping people and building and grounds, both of which I'm a part of. I remember many Friday nights at the supper, welcoming guests with Tom. I was struck by his friendliness and open-mindedness. Tom was always interested in people's experiences and would freely share his many life experiences, and he had many to share. Tom was ready anytime for any discussion on any topic, and I was always impressed with his ability to cut through the rhetoric and to get to the essence of the problem, often with a solution. His intellect was beyond compare. Yet he is one of the easiest people to talk to. I will miss our discussions. He shared many ideas for improvements to our community and buildings. His insistence on resolving the faulty grease trap ultimately led to a completely new kitchen. Among his many achievements, Tom, with some helpers, as Barbara mentioned, changed every fixture and light to LEDs in the first floor Conway and Gilmore, and single-handedly replaced every emergency exit signs in all the church buildings. I will miss Tom and his friendship. But every time I leave the church and look up at the exit signs, I will think of Tom and remember what a good man he was.
If Reggie can do it, I can too. These are just some of the things I love about Tom. Barbara. Weekly flowers for Barbara. Tai Chi at Lassing Park. Pokemon. Love for their grandchildren and grandchildren. Tom's creativity and technical wizardry. Whether it was electrical or political, Tom could figure out a way to make things work. Tom's advocacy for the Chinese minority group, the Uyghurs. He and Barbara met and talked with Uyghurs and visited ancient Buddha paintings and caves. During the pandemic, UUSP hosted Zoom meetings, giving participants a chance to experience cuisine from diverse cultures. Tom showed a video of himself making special noodles, typical to the Uyghur region, that is hard to say together, which required a combination of athleticism and eye-hand coordination. I love the image of Barbara and Tom in their golf cart. Tom's playfulness, his inquisitiveness, and sense of adventure. The love of travel, making commuting to China seem like a normal thing. I always admired Tom's ability to figure out church mysteries like the air conditioner in this room
and the electrical system throughout the old and new buildings, among many other puzzles inherent in taking care of an old building. I will keep every email from Tom as if they were the Holy Grail, because as you use, we get to define our own sources of spirituality. And Tom was good for this soul.
I remember when Tom and Barbara moved in next to me. They were now going to be my third neighbor. Start of a wonderful relationship. When you met Tom, you just felt there was so much more to him than you could ever imagine. He just gave you that feeling that, yes, he was very intelligent, but his intelligence wasn't book learned. It was something that he was born with or created for himself. He just was such a giving and understanding person that he didn't take anything on surface level. He always looked deeper, and I was always in awe of him because he was always so compassionate. And we bored him to death on the porch. And then he had to excuse himself when we talked politics. But we loved him, and I'll miss him so much. As a token of our friendship, the way I saved myself sometimes when he got a little curmudgeon with me is that he loved a particular breakfast bread that I made. It's orange cranberry bread. So for today, I made orange cranberry bread.
Thank you. Cousin Peter.
Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Fillmore. I'm one of the Canadian cousins. We don't have many cousins in my family. There are, I think, only 8 of us, 3 in the U.S. and 5 in Canada. And Tom was the youngest and was referred to in the family as Baby Tom. We all loved him very much and wished that we could have seen more of him. I think I got to see him maybe once a year at the most, but it was always memorable, and I cherish those memories of Tom and Barbara and their lovely family. Thanks.
Okay, I'll come back.
Hello. So I just wanted to share some of my memories of Tom, or as I called him mostly, Opie. Some of my earliest memories of him are probably when him and Omi would visit us, and I would sit probably for hours playing on his iPad, probably playing Flappy Bird or some other ridiculous game. But over the years, me and Tom's relationship developed further and further. For many summers, I would visit Omi and Opie. Just alone. I would fly down, and they would pick me up at the airport, and I would just spend a couple days with them in Florida. And he took me to a Rays game one time, which was the first time I'd ever been to an MLB game, and it was a great time. And we went deep-sea fishing on a little expedition. I'm not sure how many fish we actually caught, but it's not about that. And yeah, also when we were living in London, when they visited, and we did like an urban fishing thing, and we probably caught 1 fish in like 4 hours. But it was just great quality time. And if there's one thing that I remember about Tom is that he'll always be honest with you, and he wants the best for you, and he has great intentions, and he just wants you to succeed. So.
Well, I'm one of several Aspect members here from Eckerd College, and Aspect's been a blessing to all of us because it's an exceptional group of people, and we know how much Tom and Barbara have added to Aspect. So you couldn't help but love, admire, and respect Tom, just meeting him, speaking briefly with Tom, or hearing him lecture at Aspect. My wife Debbie, fortunately, heads foreign films at Aspect, to which Barbara and Tom would attend. And Debbie showed a film about Japan, and fortuitously, Tom and Barbara were headed for Japan. So this was shortly before Aspect, the fall of '09. No, not '09, 19. A decade just passes. It doesn't make much difference at our age. Fall of 2019. So Tom dropped Barbara off as he still in 2019 was working on his way to Shanghai and back. And we met in Kyoto, and our Airbnb owner was Japanese and had the four of us for dinner at her home for a magnificent Japanese dinner. And so one of the unique experiences we got to share with Barbara and Tom that we will remember forever.
Hi, I'm Rob Mayatki. I had the marvelous opportunity to work with Tom for about 10 years. He was such a giving guy and meant a lot to me. He mentored myself, a lot of people we worked with, but a couple of funny stories, but you will understand that that's the way Tom was. I'm sitting talking to him in front of his desk, and I look on his bulletin board, and there's a certificate for I don't know how many hours of him donating his time for a lifeline. And I congratulated him on what he had done for so many people. His response was, I didn't lose anybody. We were not real friendly with the local FDA in California because of some things we didn't do real well. And I said we probably should try to find a way to improve that relationship. Tom's idea was with the department, the DEA, to help them figure out if there indeed was a meth lab. Well, the idea turned into 1 month he had been gone for 2 weeks trying to shut down meth labs near Yosemite. And the DEA person came back in and said, well, once again, Tom's message is there. They've decided they're not going to try this anymore. So he was such a giving person to everybody. I know there are people listening today that wish they were here, but I just wanted to let you know how much you meant to myself and the team at Aerojet. For those years, we made sure that we made a lot of other people's lives a lot better through medicine, and are very proud of it, and proud of Tom as part of that. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Neal Jones. I'm a member of this church. I knew Tom through our covenant group, and what I learned about him there and what I learned about him through his welcoming and accepting interactions with my husband Barry during coffee hour show me the same thing. And I want to call this out. I know he was brilliant and ingenious and all these things we've been hearing, but I want to speak to his kindness and his acceptance of everyone. It was really, truly remarkable. Our covenant group was like a school about kindness and acceptance. And I just remember that and love it so much. I had to speak to that.
Thank you. Barbara, I just want to say what it has meant to us over the years. you and Tom walking down the street. I'm from a little community group that lives on the same street as Tom and Barbara. My name is Lizzie, by the way. And just every time we passed you and Tom, or you passed us, this warm greeting that we are living our different lives of sorts, and yet we can be friends. And another thing I wanted to say, which is a little humorous, is walking down the street and seeing Tom doing his Tai Chi always brought a little smile to our community and to myself. And I just want to continue to encourage you as you go on now without Tom, and I appreciated what you said. So anyhow, thanks for inviting me and Bob and Christina to come. Thank you.
I'm Janet Ferguson. I'm also with Aspect, and I knew Tom and Barbara through Aspect. And I admired something about Tom that became more and more obvious, which was that for our weekly Wednesday morning session called Economics and Prosperity, again and again, there would be a talk presented by Tom Archibald. And it turned out he would read a book, get instant expertise. He denied that. He said, I don't know anything about this subject, but we're going to have fun talking about this subject. So one day when we were together over dinner, or we did a lot of dinners out, had a good time at Chataway's, I said, Tom, it's just amazing to me. You seem so relaxed in whatever condition you're in. And he burst out laughing and he said, are you kidding? I'm as tight as a spring, but I just make it come out and we have a good time, and then I'm relaxed having a good time.
Hi, once again, I'm Luke. I'm Miley and Brett's son, one of the grandchildren. You know, I always thought, even from a young age, that Tom was someone who really commanded respect, first and foremost, even from his grandchildren. But in the last few years, getting to see Omi and Opie together has made me understand more about him on a deeper level, and just seeing the love between them. And then I got to go on the cruise with you, and every morning you'd wake up and go for a walk together. And then me and my partner of 5 years now were walking through a park in New York, and it just, everything felt right, and we looked to each other, and I said, this is what Omi and Opie must feel like. And it's a very nice thing to have as an example. Yeah.
Please share the rest of your memories. We'll have one more afterwards. Please share the rest of your memories in the book in the back and in those cards.
Hi, Harry. One of the grandchildren. I just wanted to say to Omi and all the family that Opie has in the way that I go through the world and think about the people that I interact with, and the way that I think about problems and everything, like everybody's been talking about. I see so much of Opie, especially lately in the past couple of months. And like my mom mentioned, I felt like, you know, whenever I needed to, I could call up Opie and Omi and talk to them, and he would have just like the best advice, the best, most thoughtful things to say ever, and would really, I would always walk away from a conversation with him looking at the world in a different way than I walked into it. And even from a very young age, I always felt like he really respected me and respected my thoughts and my feelings, which was really important, I think, as a young person. And his thoughtfulness, like we would always have conversations about like different topics that I was really excited about at the time, and he would know much more than I did, but we would still talk about it, and I felt like I learned so much from him, and just that so much of the person that I am now is informed by him and by the way that he went through the world. So I carry him with me, I guess.
We'd like to invite John and James to come up and I believe sing one of Tom's favorite hymns, Spirit of Life. What? Those who know it, yes, let's sing it together.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
As I extinguish our chalice, I don't have any prepared remarks. And in some ways, Tom's light has gone from us. But in other ways, it will never leave, because he lives on in these stories we've just heard, and his love and his works for us and for the world. And as Reggie put it, I guess, all we have to do is look up and see Tom's presence in the physical light fixtures that he put in, and if not that, in the impact he had on me, certainly, and on the rest of us. I hope you can stay. We have a reception right next door in Gilmore Hall. Blessings all.